I was in Washington for a Politico meeting the other day, and since there was time available, I contacted the Department of Justice and was fortunate enough yesterday morning to have a meeting with Sandra Webb, the Principal Deputy Director for the Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services. I was able to deliver to her the report that our City Council received on Tuesday of this week, and it gave us an opportunity to discuss the President's initiative on body cameras. So where it stands now is the Department of Justice is going to have a series of discussions and hearings around the country, probably by region. Most likely for us it would be Chicago, where they hope to have a dialogue with municipal leaders, community leaders, and law enforcement about rolling out the President's initiative in regards to body cameras. We discussed a number of items which clearly the Department of Justice had not prepared for, and we discussed things involving juveniles, the use of cameras when investigating sensitive crimes and domestic abuse, and also the commercial use of such videos, which is already a concern. We've seen that in the Northwest with some communities where video already used on police cars turns up on TV shows about police chases. And there's clearly concern about the exploitation of citizens in regards to all of this, which is not to say that's going to be an impediment to the utilization of body cameras, but it is a concern that needs to be addressed. And what this next quarter will do from the beginning of 2015 through the spring is give Madison an opportunity to join with other cities and with the Department of Justice in coming up with really clear protocols and the utilization of body cameras so that it's effective in terms of protecting all of us in a fair and responsible way. That means we will fold in our work, which is already underway, with these other endeavors. And so at this point, I'd like to just have Chief Koval give a update as to where we are with the receipt of the report by Captain Roman that the council received on Tuesday, and where we go from here. Chief.
Thank you, Mayor. The report that we submitted by way of council resolution that was due on December 2nd has now been tendered, and it will be examined by an ad hoc committee of the City Council. And of course, our hope, as is part of their mission, is that their process will be to create a committee that represents as many possible interests as we can glean, both from external stakeholders to privacy advocates to people that are underrepresented in the community, as well as a labor faction from the police union. And we will attempt to do a very comprehensive outreach, establishing a 360-degree perspective on the pros and cons of launching such an initiative in the first quarter of 2016. So I have no doubt but that they will be looking at subject matter experts. They'll be doing community polling, both door-to-door as well as electronic. There'll be a host of community forums and opportunities to speak. And through that process, we hope to deliver a balanced perspective, enumerating the pros and cons of such an initiative. And then once that report has been submitted to council and the mayor for review, that will then be our next step in terms of how we will proceed moving forward in 2016. And of course, there'll be a technology element as well as a cost balance effectiveness point that will have to be established for that. So that's just a sort of a summary of what we have to date, and then I'll turn it back to the mayor.
Well,
okay.
Questions?
Mayor, in terms of protocols, what's out there currently? Because there are police departments who are, if you will, more mature in relation to having body cameras than other departments, such as Madison, just on the cusp here.
It varies by city and state. Everything from open records laws to how reviews are done of the video to questions of storage. It really varies.
Do you, at this point, are you in favor of them or not, or is it totally dependent
We are going to have body cameras. There's no question about that, and I think that's going to be uniform throughout the United States.
But the question is, having said that, what do you have to determine subsequently?
I'm not sure I understand.
We're going to have body cameras.
Right.
Where do you go from there?
If I may, I think one of the things that we have to be sensitive to are what are the protocol operations once these cameras are deployed. You'll see sort of the spectrum go from everywhere from the time the officer goes to briefing to the time they call it quits for the day, that some people would urge that be on continuously. Others are saying, you have to pick your spots selectively in the cases of where there might be a juvenile engagement or a neighborhood relationship that's being established. Should the police have that monitored, or will it have a chilling effect? So there's a lot of things that have to be discussed in terms of what's appropriate. Here in Madison, one of our benchmarks is that we have a very diverse community coming from all parts of the globe. I don't know that we necessarily have the same double down, bring on the cameras mentality or mindset based on what their historical implications have been with the police in their countries of origin. We have a community that's laboring in the shadows. I don't know to what extent that's going to have a continued chilling effect on us trying to establish relational engagement with certain populations in Madison. So I think we want to look very carefully, very sensitively at what kind of protocols make the most sense for Madison. I don't know that I want to necessarily adopt a one-size-fits-all cut across the board thing that might work for Chicago, which might work for Milwaukee, which might be abhorrent to some tenants and residents of our city. I think we want to tailor.
Have you gotten feedback to that extent, Chief Koval?
Yes.
You've gotten feedback from communities of color? Or
yes.
Can you specify for us feedback where they would feel like the transparency of a camera would be outweighed by some cultural abhorrence of being on camera? Can you speak to that?
We had testimony at the council meeting a couple of weeks ago from representatives, I think it was from Freedom Inc., who raised questions particularly about the impact on those living in the shadows in fear of deportation and concerns there. And this is not just Madison. These concerns have been raised elsewhere. I now understand your question.
Yeah.
And the point that I was making when we started is we don't know the answers to those questions, and that's why we have to have this conversation on the protocols. And we have to hear from the community, and we have to hear these concerns.
How do you
So, Chief, you're talking about...
Excuse me. Yes.
When you look at all the different questions that still have to be answered in a really exhaustive process here, how do you kind of strike that balance between, I think, a certain level of urgency that people, with the height that this has in the national conversation, the urgency there, with maybe a perception of not dragging your feet? Do you know what I mean?
I think when we have the conversation, we'll also when we have the conversation, we'll also find out whether or not folks want to get these protocols and get these standards established, or just go right into the utilization of the body cameras. Now, here in Madison, we've already had a conversation about starting a pilot project, and that seems to have been agreed upon. So I'll assume we'll continue with that.
In terms of the funding side, they're somewhat expensive. So were you able to nail down with the Department of Justice at all how that funding might work or whether Madison could be eligible for that?
The Department of Justice officials made it clear that they don't know how they're going to administer the program. They have not thought about allocation of the dollars, and they have not thought about the ongoing costs of operation. And in fact, when you take all of the costs associated, the initial acquisition is just the tip of the iceberg.
Is it, will procedurally, will the PD offer what they think should be done and then the council gets involved? How's your methodology as far as coming up with your policy of utilization of the cameras? How do you see that playing out?
Well, I think it's important to reflect the fact that the ad hoc committee will be directed by a consortium led by the council. I don't want it to appear, because I want to be transparent, that the PD is sort of dictating the outcome of whatever findings the council comes up with. Clearly, we're going to be an instrumental player in helping them to get to directed subject matter experts, IT professionals, helping them with polling and things. But at the end of the day, it has to be an independent finding by them. And so I don't want to become sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy or conclude as to what their findings may be. My sense is that body cameras in some shape or form will become part of the new normal here in Madison at some juncture. But the question is, to what degree, to what extent, and with what sort of benchmarking constraints placed upon it.
So it sounds like there's two processes here. There's the local process, this committee that's meeting, and then also sort of more regionally with the feds, with DOJ, to determine how that's going to go. Are there timelines kind of identified for how those different...
Well, the Department of Justice wants to have the conversation this first quarter of the year. Our own goal was to get operational in 2015, so it looks like we're compatible. I want to get refocused for a moment. This is not solely about the implementation of body cameras. It's about something much bigger and more important, and that is building trust and confidence and safety for the people of our community. That's the priority. That's the goal. That's the number one objective. Body cameras are simply one more instrument in affecting that goal. And so when we talk about body cameras, we are talking about using them so that we create trust, openness, transparency in our really principal objective, public safety. Safety of the citizens, the residents, anybody who's in the city of Madison. And that includes the public safety officers, that includes visitors, it includes everyone. That's what this is about.
You know, the president also talked about funds for additional training for police. When you talk about kind of a more holistic approach to regaining or reinforcing trust, and maybe this is for Chief Koval, what are the other pieces that you see in addition to body cameras?
Well, to bootstrap the mayor's comments, I think at the end of the day, if all cameras do is authenticate poor police behaviors, I don't know that we've reached Shangri-La where we want to be in terms of that kind of level of trust. For me, it's always been what you're bringing to the market. If we don't do a good job at vetting those people who we even offer a conditional job offer, the process is flawed from the outset. So we have to examine how we recruit, the methods that we offer conditional job offers. We have to have the enlisted help of our citizens in looking at the scope, the tenor, and the type of training that's being offered in our academy. And then it can't be sort of a an initial inoculation with no more booster shots. We have to continue to revisit these issues of cultural competency, sensitivity, an understanding of police powers and discretion and limitations on that throughout an officer's career on an annual basis. And it has to be reinforced, and it has to be genuine, as heard from sort of the CEO of the company. In that case, it has to be heard from me.
Is it your hope that this is going to validate what you have put forth and the institutional reputation of the police force, that, yeah, there's not going to be any surprises here. This is just going to show the populace this is the way we do things here?
I think so. Well, that is my hope. I hope that it will be an affirming process. Folks, we got to remember, Madison is not without camera technologies as we speak. Some of the most highly contentious issues are currently being captured digitally on recording. Traffic stops are one of the highest forms of complaints. We have been digitally recording those for literally for years. Interrogations of both juveniles and adults where there's Miranda implications, those are being taped. High-speed pursuits, those are being taped. Oh, and SWAT operations, which arguably have the most highly liable situations being thrust upon the public, those have been taped, those operations, for the last 2 years. So we're not starting from ground zero when it comes to technology. And fortunately, I'm not starting from the same place as a Ferguson in sense of this massive chasm of mistrust. We have a workforce that is among the most diverse in the nation. The nation's national average of women is 12%. We're at 30%. Our people of color represent 20% of my workforce. So we're not starting from a bad place. The average Madison police officer is 29 years of age, has a bachelor's degree, and has numerous life, community, and work experiences behind their belt in order to get to the starting line of this career or this profession. Typically, in our composition of our class, there's no militaristic components whatsoever. From day one, we are emphasizing that the tone, the tenor, the type of police officer I want for our community is that which reflects the fiduciary relationships and understanding of a guardian, not a warrior. That's a different mindset than what you're seeing across the country. It is shifting, gratefully, but law enforcement, quite frankly, tends to move at the speed of glaciers unless there are significant news events like what we're seeing, lawsuits, or legislative mandates urging changes. This is a group that's typically reactionary as it goes. So this is getting a lot of folks' attentions. And as perverse as that sounds, because this is regrettable that we have to get there, we're finally having some of the adult conversations that are long overdue, not just about the police. It's about the criminal justice system as well.
One thing I heard at the city council meeting from the public was that
You stayed up there till 1 a.m.?
well, luckily the public testimony was right away. But,
All right.
And you can watch it on the city channel anytime you want.
That sounds like salacious
But one thing I heard
viewing.
is that from people was that the police already have all the tools, have all the resources, and wouldn't that money be better allocated toward actually solving the problem of poverty?
Well, thank you for that softball question. I certainly appreciate it, because if he asked me today, and I'm probably breaking ranks, and I think I've said it publicly, we're talking about eyeball-popping sort of startup costs to do something of this order of magnitude, conservatively. So if you're asking me, if you gave me $1 million today and said, here's $1 million, have at it, go with it, have a good time with these body cameras, I would say, could I trade it? Could I trade it for 13 neighborhood officers? More? Because I want to grow policing at an organic level, and that happens in the neighborhoods. That's where the engagement occurs. I'd much rather our officers continually be trained, retrained, refortified, and given the resources to understand what community engagement is at a grassroots level in the neighborhoods where not only crime is an issue, but quality of life is an issue. I'd much rather have those sort of experiences than authenticating what the police are or are not doing. That's sort of after the fact from my standpoint. That helps with reducing claims of false allegations. That helps in plaintiff's cause of actions if there is wrongful conduct by the police. But does that get to the root of what the community feels about the level of trust they have for their police department? I think that's the deeper cause that we have to be drilling for.
And you've said you think body cameras are inevitable, but do you think, well, one, do you still think that, and do you think they're a good idea?
I think, in principle, they're a good idea to the extent that they create transparency and accountability. If that's the deal breaker that the public ultimately needs to have in order to feel good about their local police department, so be it. I personally think it's a slightly shallow or short-sighted sort of a solution, because I think it only touches the tip of the iceberg, if you will, as I've tried to allude to. If it becomes the will of the people, if this finding in this report, and if in the mayor directing the public policy of this community mandates that at some shape or form these body cameras will be the new normal for the MPD, I'm not going to be an obstructionist. I will embrace it, and we will incorporate it with good protocol and procedures. But the reason you have a sense of reluctance on my part is that I'm a little concerned that cameras are being overhyped and overbilled as a panacea to a much more deep-rooted problem. It's a cosmetic solution to a much more deep-seated issue in terms of the relationships that are or are not happening appropriately between the police and the community. And that's my biggest issue.
Do you see something like that reflected in the Eric Garner decision, where you do have something that's videotaped, but doesn't wind up?
Exactly. What you have is authenticated problems. How did it get to that point? That's a problem. That's exactly what I'm saying. So we've chronicled bad behavior. How does that help in the long term? It does help in terms of the initial issues for the public to see police behaving badly, and what are the repercussions, what are the implications moving forward. But that visual, as graphic as it is, does that get to the heart of how does the community before that event feel, and how are they going to feel after about their police department, unless we've done the due diligence of creating some relationship building?
I just want to jump in on one thing. We've only got a couple of minutes here. Body cameras do not solve the problem of inequity and the challenges of social justice. That is going to come from affordable housing, jobs, equity in transportation, health care, and quality child care. There are some big boulders that have to be moved here, especially in the state of Wisconsin, some of which are beyond the control of city government and beyond the control of county government, and they rest with the state. In the political conference I just came back from, I heard about massive commitments to early childhood education. What's happening with 2-, 3-, and 4-year-olds before they get to kindergarten. We are way behind in that area. Now, Phoenix and Salt Lake City have done some really fantastic things in regards to affordable housing. Well, we've got a commitment, and we're going down that road with housing first. It's going to cost money, and there's got to be support services to make that housing work. There has to be greater commitment, financial commitment to our public schools. There has to be commitments to our junior colleges, to our universities, in regards to classroom support for folks. Healthcare. There's a world out there that's demanding healthcare workers good jobs. We have institutions that educate and train in that area, but they don't have budgets that are sufficient to take all the applicants that want to enter those fields and to train people who are needed by the healthcare providers. And in the area of transportation, I'm watching around the country as regional transit systems are funded through local regional taxation systems. We can't get there. We aren't given the authority to set that up. We want to make that commitment. We're concerned about people working third shifts who can't get to the job. We're concerned about neighborhoods that have relatively low populations and relatively low incomes, which don't get adequate public transit. All of this is what's going to really solve the underlying problem. So,
Mayor, what's your feelings about the apparent end of rhythm and booms?
well, next Tuesday we're having another press conference. We'll take care of that. We'll take care of State Street at that time. Thanks.
Public service announcement, guys. Stay away from Park and Badger on 330. Might be some traffic problems.
Do you anticipate any arrests there, Chief?
I don't. No. No.
I mean, what if buses are blocked?
We'll reroute them.
We're taking care of it.
We'll be okay.
You'll reroute them, and
Yep.
you don't anticipate arrests?
No. No. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Good. How are you?
Good.